Hello, and welcome to the Snake Country Survival Guide. I'm Melissa, and along with Jeff Smith, who's also pictured here, we founded Advocates for Snake Preservation to change how people view and treat snakes. Advocates for Snake Preservation provides solutions to human-snake conflicts that sometimes end badly for people and often prove fatal for snakes. We also tell stories about wild snake behavior to counter prevailing myths and make snakes more familiar and less scary. And while that storytelling component is often enough to resolve many human-snake conflicts, today we're going to go over some practical advice for living in snake country. So I think a lot of us move to places where we end up in nuisance wildlife situations because we wanted to live in nature and have wildlife in our backyard. And most people graciously welcome beautiful feathered birds, cute furry mammals, and even scaly buddies like this little alligator lizard here. But those attitudes often change when it's a snake, especially one like this western diamondback rattlesnake and right at the front door. Many people share Indiana Jones's attitude and wonder, why snakes? Why does it have to be snakes? Why does it have to be snakes right at my house? But I think what we need to keep in mind is this is their home too. Snakes are an integral part of a healthy ecosystem as both predators and prey, and usually they were here before we built our house and moved into the area. If you walk into your local hardware store, you'll find a variety of products that claim to be scientifically proven to repel or prevent snakes from showing up in your yard. And most of these products are totally ineffective. The ones that are effective in certain circumstances are so toxic and gross, you probably wouldn't want to use them in your yard if your pets or your family hang out there at all. Other products like glue traps or bird and erosion netting are lethal to snakes and other wildlife, and just, not being a very good neighbor to your local wildlife. And while there may be times when a snake absolutely does need to be moved, at least a short distance away from an area of high human traffic, in general, relocation of snakes has a lot of issues. And if you want to take a deep dive into this, I suggest that you check out episode 7 of our online series, Snakes Are Everything, where we featured Erica Novak to go over the latest science on this topic and how we can improve these situations for snakes and people. Another thing to keep in mind when choosing how you handle snakes in the yard is that most snake bites happen either when people approach or are handling snakes or when they're trying to kill them. And even taking what seems like a safe approach of shooting a snake from a distance can often end in injury or even death to the humans involved, and sometimes the humans not involved as well. Even the biggest snakes that we have here in the United States are a pretty small target to shoot at, and so it's pretty easy to miss or to have the shot or bullets ricochet and hurt someone else. And none of these methods, be it trapping, repelling, or moving snakes once they've shown up, get at the root of the problem, and that is preventing these situations from happening in the first place. So first, let's talk about how snakes make good neighbors. Snakes are an effective, all-natural pest control. They won't chew up your wires and cause very expensive damage to your house or your car, and they also won't raid your garden. In fact, snakes may actually eat the animals that are responsible for that kind of damage, such as this eastern patchnose snake feasting on a deer mouse in my garden. And snakes, especially vipers, which include rattlesnakes, copperheads, and cottonmouths, are more effective at controlling prey populations than bird or mammal predators. And that's because their nature is to be non-competitive. You'll often find them living with and hunting in areas used by other species of snakes, as well as other members of their own species of snakes. They're also good at fasting for long periods of time, so they can sort of wait out bad conditions instead of moving on if needed. Snakes are an important source of food for other animals, like predatory birds, predatory mammals, And birds that we maybe don't normally think of as raptors per se, but like this roadrunner, reptiles, including snakes and even rattlesnakes, are an important part of their diet. And snakes are also food for other snakes. So maybe you're not ready to welcome vipers into your yard, even though they are such great predators. So maybe you want to make friends with some of your non-venomous snake neighbors. King snakes, like the one pictured here, eating a tiger rattlesnake, as well as racers, coach whips, whip snakes, they are all known to be snake predators. And other snakes that are non-venomous, while we don't think that they eat a lot of rattlesnakes, it seems like rattlesnakes just don't like to be around them. So here we have an Arizona black rattlesnake who really seems to be uncomfortable with this gopher snake or bull snake getting too close to them. And it could be because they know that they compete for food. Both of these species have a pretty similar diet. Um, or maybe they're worried that this one will develop a taste for rattlesnake. But either way, having a healthy population of some of these similar sized snakes that could either prey upon rattlesnakes or compete with them for food may be one way to reduce the number of rattlesnakes that come into your yard. So the first step in creating a safe and wildlife-friendly yard is to learn your neighbor's habits. Like most animals, snakes are going to be attracted to a place because there is food, water, shelter, or mates there. And debris piles are one thing that tends to attract snakes. So they can be natural, like this pile of wood that an Arizona black rattlesnake is using to hunt, or they can be unnatural debris. This plastic truck bed liner is ugly and maybe not the first thing that would pop to mind as being good snake habitat, but this has attracted several rock rattlesnakes that have shown up in our backyard in southwestern New Mexico. Sheet metal can also be an attractant for snakes as they like to use it for cover, as this eastern patchnose snake was doing. While you may have heard that snakes do not need or drink water because they get it all from their food, in dry places such as the American Southwest, they definitely are attracted to water, both because they do drink it, they will drink from puddles, flowing water, even rain as it's coming down from above, but also pools that are on the ground like this, in addition to providing a place for snakes to drink, are also a nice place to hunt. So snakes learn pretty quickly that if they hang out near the pools, as these two western diamondback rattlesnakes are doing, some of the animals that they like to feed upon will also show up for a drink. So it's a good place to get a drink and it's a good place to eat. So it's doubly attractive for snakes. Other snake attractants may not seem so obvious as the wood piles and the water sources and other things that attract their food. So this is a pile of manure with a western diamondback rattlesnake sitting on top. And at a nature preserve where we used to live and work, this was a snake hotspot. And one of the reasons we think that may be, even though it's not particularly good for camouflage and is maybe not attracting a lot of food, because the manure is composting, it's producing some heat. So when the weather was kind of cool, it's kind of like sitting on one of those hot rocks, like a nice warm place to sit. And so this illustrates the importance of not just thinking in generalities about what, attracts snakes in most places, but actually being observant and taking time to learn from the animals that end up showing up in your yard. Because you may have some very different and surprising things that attract snakes, which is what we found to be the case with this manure pile. So once you've learned, either in the general sense, if you haven't had any animals show up yet, or once you start having animals show up in your yard, and you can start learning from their behavior and where they show up, then we can start thinking about landscaping with snakes and how we can modify our landscape so that it's a safer place while still being welcoming to local wildlife, or our behavior on our landscape so that it's safer for everyone involved. So the first step is not necessarily to put up a sign in your yard telling everyone to be careful that it's rattlesnake habitat, but to keep that sign in the back of your mind. Be careful. Always look before you put your hands and feet some places. Don't reach into things that you can't see. And we're going to keep in mind all those things that could potentially attract snakes and where we think snakes are most likely to show up as we move about our yard. So in our own yards, we can make sure that it is possible to watch where we're putting our hands and feet so that we can be careful around snakes. So when you have a place that's a known attractant to snakes, such as this little rock pile right here, make sure there's plenty of wide open spaces around it so you can watch where you're going and watch what you're doing and not have to get right on top of the area where there could potentially be a snake hiding. If you're going to offer water or food for birds and other local wildlife, the safest thing to do is to keep that up off the ground where it's less likely to attract rodents and snakes. And when you're out in your yard at night, make sure you always have a light with you, a headlamp or a flashlight. And that's because snakes are especially hard to see at dark, even if there's a full moon. And this way you can avoid a surprise encounter with someone like this western black-tailed rattlesnake. Once you know where snakes are likely to show up, or once you have places where you've seen snakes repeatedly, then you can choose to use these as opportunities to see some really cool snake behavior and do it from a safe distance as we're seeing here. And again, this is not something you're going to be able to do until you've taken the time to learn and observe what the animals are doing in your yard. And then you can take a step back and use binoculars or even spotting scopes or cameras to see some really cool things that rival the behavior you'd see at any bird bath or bird feeder. So you might remember this slide from the very beginning of the talk. This is a western diamondback rattlesnake that's right at the front door. So the snake wasn't actually trying to get inside. What happened was she had struck a lesser earless lizard not too far away, and as that lizard was dying from her venomous bite, they had run towards the door, and the snake had tracked the lizard there and just wanted to finish her meal. Feeding behavior is not something we get to see in the wild, even as scientists who spend just hours and hours and days looking for snakes. You rarely get to see them eat anything. So it was super exciting to get to see one eat, and even more so that it was right in front of our front door. So also a throwback, here's that manure pile again. And remember I said this was something as of a hot spot for the snakes in this area. And, you know, again, in addition to the safety aspect of when you know there's a place that attracts snakes, you can be very careful when you approach it. You can also be very careful when you approach it and approach it with cameras ready to go, so that when you stumble upon something like this is the same manure pile. We have two different western diamondback rattlesnakes that are engaged in combat over a female. This is another behavior that, again, even scientists who spend all their time looking for snakes rarely ever get to see, but something that you could potentially see in your yard when you start welcoming snakes into it. But while having venomous snakes around your home may provide some of the best opportunities for seeing really cool behavior like ritualized combat or feeding, they also pose a potential risk to us. And while we have talked about the things that you can do to modify your landscape and learn how to live more safely, even if there are rattlesnakes in your yard, a lot of that stuff doesn't apply so well to some of our other family members. So for dogs, in many places, there is specialized training available to teach them to avoid rattlesnakes and other venomous snakes. This is also something, if you have a good relationship with your dog and the training isn't available in your area, you can do it yourself. Another option for dogs that is available in some place is a vaccine that will lessen the negative impacts of a snake bite. So for both of these, both the training and the vaccine, the availability is super variable just throughout the US, and the quality of both of these things varies too. And it's also going to be different for different dogs. Some of them are going to take well to training. Some dogs have had really nasty reactions to the vaccine. So for both of these, I'd suggest that you do your own research, talk to people in your area about training that's available, and if the vaccines are available, talk to your veterinarian and make your own decision. And also feel free to get in touch with us if you have specific questions. We're not dog trainers, we're not veterinarians, but happy to share what we know about it at the time, and if that can be helpful for you. With cats, it's a little easier. If you keep your cat inside and you keep snakes out of your house, you're going to avoid any conflicts there. But I understand that a lot of cats want to be outside and a lot of people want to let their cats outside. So the safest way to do that, much like with dogs, is to keep your cat under control and under observation the whole time. So that can be by using a leash and harness. Installing a catio is another option for giving them some safe outside time that both protects them from a bad situation with a venomous snake, but also protects local wildlife that cats may like to kill and eat. But if you really want a place in your yard that's free of snakes, snake exclusion fencing is probably your best bet. So this is a special fence that keeps snakes from climbing over, crawling under, or getting through a fence. So you can have your dogs out there, have your kids out there, have your cats out there without having to worry so much about snakes. And depending on where you are, there may be companies that'll come out and do the fencing for you. If that's not the case, or you're more of a DIY type person, our Snake Country Survival Guide brochure and the Living with Snakes website has some more specific information about what type of fencing will be most effective at keeping snakes out. And if you go to our website at livingwithsnakes.org, you can both find these instructions. Also, if you want to share what you learned today in this video with someone who's maybe not going to sit through a video, or perhaps they don't have internet access and you want to have something offline to give them, at our website you can request that we send you some of those brochures so you can share this with your friends and neighbors.